In a quiet village on the outskirts of Kisumu City lived two sisters, Imani and Amani, with their loving mother, Mama Grace. Though they shared the same home and had grown up side by side, their hearts could not have been more different. Imani, the elder sister, was kind-hearted, hard-working, and exceptionally talented in fashion design. Every morning before sunrise, she swept the compound, fetched water, and then spent hours behind her old sewing machine creating colorful African dresses that amazed everyone who saw them. Whenever neighbors visited, they left carrying one of her beautiful creations and endless praise for her talent. Amani, however, had slowly become consumed by jealousy. She disliked hearing people compare her to Imani. Every compliment her sister received felt like an insult directed at her. If only people could notice me for once, she often thought bitterly. One warm evening, as the family gathered for supper, Mama Grace could hardly contain her excitement. She stood up with a broad smile and clapped her hands. In quote, "Girls, I have wonderful news." Imani immediately looked up from serving food. "What is it, Mother?" Amani also looked curious. Mama Grace smiled proudly. "Your Uncle Robert has called from New York. His company is expanding, and he has arranged for one of you to attend an interview next week. Whoever performs well will travel to New York for a new job opportunity." The room fell completely silent. "New York?" Amani asked, almost dropping her spoon. "Yes," Mama Grace replied happily. "This could be the opportunity we've prayed for all these years." Imani covered her mouth in disbelief. "Oh, Mother, imagine working there. We could finally improve your life." Mama Grace nodded proudly. "I know both of you will do your best." Amani forced herself to smile. "Yes, we'll both do our best." But inside, her heart was burning. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Amani lay awake, staring at the ceiling. "So once again everything will be about Imani," she whispered angrily. She remembered every moment the villagers had praised her sister. "Imani made my wedding dress. Imani repaired my daughter's school uniform. Imani is so respectful." Each memory felt like another wound. If she gets this chance too, everyone will worship her forever. She clenched her fists. "I won't let that happen." The following morning, Mama Grace walked to the bustling village market carrying vegetables to sell. Unable to hide her excitement, she shared the wonderful news with the other women. "My brother has invited one of my daughters to New York," she announced proudly. The women gasped. "New York? What a blessing. You are truly fortunate, Mama Grace." Within minutes, the entire marketplace was buzzing with excitement. One woman laughed. "It has to be Imani. That girl is talented enough to impress anyone." Another nodded. "I've seen her dresses. She'll surely get selected." A third woman disagreed. "Don't underestimate Amani. Sometimes the quiet ones surprise everyone." The gossip spread from one vegetable stall to another. By afternoon, everyone in the village knew about the upcoming interview. Children shouted as they played, "Imani is going to America." Old men, resting beneath the big mango tree, joined the discussion. "I hear Uncle Robert owns a big company overseas. Whoever goes there will never struggle again." Outside a nearby shop, two young women whispered quietly, "If Imani leaves, we'll miss her tailoring." "I know. She's the only one who sews clothes that actually fit." Unfortunately, Amani happened to walk past just as they spoke. Neither woman noticed her standing behind them. "Honestly," one continued, "I don't think Amani has much of a chance." They both laughed. Those words pierced Amani's heart like sharp knives. She quietly turned away before anyone saw the tears forming in her eyes. When she reached home, she found Imani measuring fabric on the dining table. "I found a few interview questions online," Imani said cheerfully. "Come, let's practice together." 2. Imani threw her handbag onto a chair. "I don't need your help." Imani looked confused. "I only wanted us both to succeed." "So now you're pretending to be the generous sister?" Amani snapped. Mama Grace entered just in time. Amani, what? Your sister is trying to help you. I don't need her pity. Imani remained calm. I'm not competing against you. Amani laughed sarcastically. Really? Then why does everyone keep saying you'll get the job? Silence filled the room. Mama Grace sighed deeply. My daughters, don't let this opportunity divide you. Imani walked over and gently held Amani's hand. No matter who gets selected, we're still sisters. Amani slowly pulled her hand away. Easy for you to say. Everyone already thinks you're better than me. She stormed into her bedroom and slammed the door so hard that the family photographs hanging on the wall shook. For several minutes, Mama Grace and Imani stood silently in the sitting room. I don't understand why she's so angry, Imani whispered, sadly. Mama Grace placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Sometimes jealousy grows quietly inside the heart. Pray that your sister finds peace before it destroys her. Outside, a curious neighbor who had heard the shouting leaned over the fence. What happened? Another woman shrugged. I think the sisters are already fighting over the New York opportunity. By evening, the entire neighborhood had begun talking. They've started competing. I hope money doesn't separate that family. May God protect those girls. Inside her bedroom, Amani sat on the edge of her bed, replaying every conversation she had heard throughout the day. Every compliment directed at Imani echoed loudly in her mind. Then a dangerous thought slowly entered her heart. If Imani cannot attend the interview, she paused, then everyone will finally have to notice me. A slow smile spread across her face, a smile that marked the beginning of a terrible plan that would change both sisters' lives forever. As the interview day drew closer, the excitement in Mama Grace's home became impossible to hide. Mama Grace talked with the girls to give Imani the opportunity, since she was the eldest and most experienced sister. A fact that Amani could not argue. She could not take the news politely. Every evening, Imani carefully arranged her portfolio of colorful fashion designs across the dining table. She practiced answering interview questions while Mama Grace proudly listened. You'll do wonderfully, Mama Grace encouraged. I hope so, Mother, Imani replied with a smile. This opportunity could change all our lives. From the doorway, Amani watched silently. Every encouraging word spoken to Imani felt like another stone placed upon her heart. That night, she could not sleep. She stared at the wooden ceiling while listening to the distant sound of crickets outside. Why is it always Imani? She whispered bitterly. She gets all the praise, all the opportunities, and everyone's love. Let's hire. She turned onto her side. If she attends that interview, she paused. Everyone will forget I even exist. The following afternoon, she secretly met her friend, Cynthia, near an abandoned footpath outside the village. Cynthia was the kind of friend you would not miss in every neighborhood mischief. Cynthia folded her arms. You still look troubled. I don't know what to do. You already know. Amani lowered her voice. I only need my sister to miss tomorrow's interview. Cynthia looked around carefully before leaning closer. There are ways to make someone suddenly become too sick to travel. Amani hesitated. Are you sure? Cynthia nodded. No one will suspect you. Amani remained silent for several seconds. Then she slowly walked away. Although fear filled her heart, jealousy spoke louder than her conscience. That evening, the family gathered for supper. Mama Grace could barely stop smiling. Tomorrow is a big day. She reached across the table and squeezed Imani's hand. Your father would have been so proud. Imani smiled warmly. I'll do my best. Amani forced herself to smile. Yes, we'll both do our best. After supper, Imani returned from visiting a nearby fabric supplier. I'm exhausted, she laughed, and so thirsty. I'll bring you some fresh juice, Amani quickly offered. Imani smiled. Thank you, sister. Amani walked into the kitchen. For several moments, she simply stood there, staring at the glass in her hands. Her hands trembled. She could still walk away. She could still tell the truth. Instead, she made a terrible choice. A few minutes later, she returned, carrying the drink. Here. Imani accepted it without hesitation. You've always known exactly what I like. She smiled gratefully and drank. Amani looked away. For a brief moment, she wished she could stop time itself. Later that evening, Mama Grace was folding clothes when she heard a loud crash from the bedroom. "Mother!" Imani cried in pain. "My stomach!" Mama Grace ran into the room. Imani had fallen beside her bed, clutching her stomach. She struggled to breathe. "It hurts." Mama Grace knelt beside her. "What happened?" "I don't know." Within minutes, the pain became unbearable. Neighbors rushed into the compound after hearing the screams. "What happened? Is she all right?" Someone hurried to call a taxi. The driver sped toward the hospital while Mama Grace held Imani's hand throughout the journey. Amani sat silently beside them. No one noticed the tears running down her face. No one knew they were tears of guilt. Hours later, doctors rushed Imani into the emergency ward. Mama Grace paced nervously outside. She clasped her hands together. "Please save my daughter." After what felt like an eternity, a doctor finally emerged. "We managed to stabilize her." Mama Grace burst into tears. "Will she recover?" "She will, though we need her to be admitted at the facility for further monitoring until she recovers." The doctor paused. "Our tests indicate she became ill after consuming a harmful substance." Mama Grace stared at him. "A harmful substance? We're still investigating." Mama Grace looked completely shocked. Meanwhile, Amani quietly lowered her head. Her secret remained hidden. While Mama Grace stayed beside Imani's hospital bed throughout the night, Amani quietly returned home to collect a few necessities. As she entered the empty house, silence filled every room. She walked toward Imani's bedroom. Her eyes immediately landed on a small travel folder neatly arranged on the bedside table. Curiosity overcame her. She slowly opened it. Inside were Imani's passport, travel documents, and a folder containing her qualification papers. Amani held the passport in her hands. So everything was ready. She whispered, "This really was meant for her." She stood silently for several moments before carefully placing everything back into the folder. Then she packed her own belongings into a small formal bag. Every item she folded reminded her that she was preparing to chase a dream that had come at a terrible cost. The following morning, sunlight slowly entered Imani's hospital room. She opened her eyes weakly. "Mother." Mama Grace smiled through her exhaustion. "Thank God you're awake." Imani looked toward the clock. Her heart sank. The interview. Mama Grace gently held her hand. "My child, you're too weak." Tears filled Imani's eyes. "I worked so hard." "I know." The room fell silent. Then Amani quietly spoke. "Mother." Mama Grace looked at her. "What is it?" "The interview shouldn't go to waste." She hesitated. "I can attend instead." Mama Grace looked uncertain. "But if I perform well, perhaps Uncle Robert will still have someone from the family." Mama Grace sighed deeply. "Perhaps you're right." Imani forced a weak smile from her hospital bed. "Go, sister." She reached for Amani's hand. "Do your best." Those simple words pierced Amani's conscience. She could barely meet her sister's eyes. Outside the hospital, the neighborhood was already buzzing with rumors. "I heard Imani suddenly became sick." Such terrible timing. She worked so hard. I was sure she'd be the one traveling. Others wondered whether fate had simply intervened. What a shame. I hope she'll recover. No one imagined the truth hiding inside the family. Amani traveled to the interview venue carrying her documents. Inside the waiting room, dozens of hopeful candidates sat quietly reviewing their notes. Some practiced introductions. Others adjusted their ties. Amani sat alone, nervously staring at the floor. For the first time since making her decision, she questioned whether success built on betrayal could ever bring peace. Soon a receptionist appeared, Miss Amani Grace. She stood, This way, please. Inside the interview room, 3 interview panelists greeted her politely. Welcome. Please have a seat. For the next 40 minutes, they asked about teamwork, responsibility, communication, and adapting to life abroad. Although she answered reasonably well, she struggled whenever the discussion turned toward fashion and design, the very area in which Imani excelled. One interviewer glanced thoughtfully at the portfolio before him. You mentioned your family has experience in fashion. Amani forced a smile. Yes, we are an organization that is related to the fashion, he continued. Therefore, we are considering a candidate with a fashion background, and you qualify on that aspect, he explained. The interview concluded. Thank you for coming. She was directed to the waiting area. A few minutes later, a gentleman walks in with a file. Miss Amani, you have been selected to join the organization, the gentleman announced politely. She could not hold the excitement to herself. I did it, she smiled excitedly as she left the offices. Walking out of the building, she looked toward the bright morning sky. Behind her smile was growing fear. Far away, in a hospital bed, her sister fought to recover. Ahead of her lay a future built on a secret that would follow her wherever she went. A few weeks later, Amani landed in New York, her heart overflowing with excitement. As the airplane descended through the clouds, she pressed her face against the window, admiring the endless skyline. I've finally made it, she whispered with a smile. This is the beginning of my new life. At the airport, Uncle Robert welcomed her warmly. Welcome to America, Amani. She hugged him tightly. Thank you for believing in me, Uncle. For the first few days, everything felt like a dream. She admired the towering skyscrapers, busy streets, and dazzling city lights. She proudly sent photos home, carefully hiding her growing anxiety. Inside the company, however, reality quickly replaced excitement. During orientation, employees were assigned practical tasks. While others confidently completed their work, Amani struggled with almost everything. She misunderstood instructions. She misplaced important documents. She failed to prepare reports correctly. One afternoon, her supervisor sighed. Amani, this report contains several errors. I'm sorry, she replied nervously. The mistakes continued. Week after week, she fell further behind. One evening, Uncle Robert invited her into his office after everyone had gone home. He closed the door gently. Amani, sit down. She could already sense what was coming. I have tried my best to mentor you, he began, but this position requires skills and experience that you simply don't have. Her eyes filled with tears. I'll work harder. I know you will, Uncle Robert replied kindly, but the company cannot continue extending your probation. Silence filled the office. What happens now? She whispered. He lowered his head. I'm sorry, Amani. We have to let you go. Her entire world collapsed. As she walked out carrying a small cardboard box containing her belongings, she remembered the day she had secretly poisoned her sister. If only I had allowed Imani to attend the interview. For the first time, guilt became heavier than disappointment. Without the job, she quickly exhausted her savings. Her apartment rent became impossible to pay. One rainy evening, she packed her clothes into 2 suitcases and left the apartment she had dreamed would become her new home. To survive, she accepted work as a nanny for a wealthy family living in a quiet New York suburb. The work was exhausting. Every morning at 5 o'clock, her alarm rang before sunrise. She quietly prepared breakfast. She ironed school uniforms. She packed lunchboxes. She washed piles of dishes. She vacuumed every room. She cleaned bathrooms until they sparkled. After that, she cared for 3 energetic children who constantly ran around the large house. Amani, one child shouted. My shoes. Amani, I spilled my juice. Amani, can you braid my hair? By evening, her feet ached. Some nights, she sat alone in her tiny servant's room, staring out of the small window at the distant city lights. She often cried herself to sleep. "I traveled across the world to become successful," she whispered. "Instead, I became a housemaid. Months became years. 1 year turned into two. Two became three. Before she realized it, 5 years had passed. Every birthday reminded her how much time had slipped away. Every Christmas, she watched other workers reunite with their families while she remained thousands of miles from home. Meanwhile, back in Kisumu City, Imani refused to allow disappointment to define her future. The day she recovered from the poisoning, she stood outside their small house looking toward the sunrise. "If one door closes," she said confidently, "God will open another." She devoted every waking hour to fashion design. Using an old sewing machine that constantly broke down, she transformed colorful African fabrics into elegant dresses, jackets, handbags, and accessories. She visited local markets searching for affordable materials. She borrowed money to buy better sewing equipment. She attended fashion exhibitions. She studied international trends late into the night. Soon, women across Kisumu proudly wore clothing designed by Imani. Boutiques began placing large orders. Soon, regional stores were requesting her collections. Before long, buyers from neighboring countries contacted her. Her workshop grew from a single room into a bustling factory employing dozens of women. Many of those women were widows and struggling single mothers whose lives completely changed through the jobs she created. One afternoon, Mama Grace stood inside the workshop, watching hundreds of sewing machines operating at once. Tears filled her eyes. "My daughter." Imani smiled. "What is it, Mother?" "You turned your greatest disappointment into someone else's opportunity." Within a few years, Imani Creations Exporters had become one of East Africa's fastest-growing fashion brands. Her African-inspired designs were featured at international fashion exhibitions. Orders began arriving from London, Paris, Dubai, Toronto. Then one day, an unexpected phone call changed everything once again. It was Uncle Robert. "Imani?" She smiled. "Uncle, I've been following your journey." "Really? I've seen your collections online." He paused proudly. "You were always the one with the talent." Imani remained silent. "I'd like to help your business." "How?" "I have connections with several fashion retailers here in New York. Send me your latest collection." Within weeks, containers filled with Imani's clothing crossed the Atlantic Ocean. Her colorful African designs appeared inside fashion stores throughout New York. Customers loved the unique patterns and craftsmanship. Orders doubled, then tripled. Ironically, the very city that Amani had betrayed her sister to reach had now become the biggest international market for Imani's fashion business. The opportunity Amani had tried to steal eventually belonged to Imani anyway, but through talent, patience, and perseverance, rather than deceit. One afternoon, while dusting shelves in her employer's living room, Amani noticed a glossy business magazine lying on the coffee table. The front cover stopped her in her tracks. There stood Imani, wearing an elegant designer dress inside a modern showroom. Behind her were smiling employees proudly displaying beautiful African fashions. The headline read, "From a small village in Kisumu to the world's fashion runways, the rise of Imani Creations." Below it was another sentence, "Now exporting exclusive African fashion to leading stores in New York." The cleaning cloth slipped from Amani's hands. "No." She slowly picked up the magazine. Inside were photographs of her sister shaking hands with Uncle Robert during the launch of Imani's New York fashion collection. Customers lined up outside stores to purchase her designs. Amani burst into tears. This should have been her journey from the beginning. That evening, she returned to her tiny room. She opened an old family photograph showing herself, Imani, and Mama Grace smiling together years earlier. "I destroyed my own future," she sobbed. No one else did. For several weeks, she could barely sleep. Finally, she made the most difficult decision of her life. "I'm going home." She resigned from her nanny position. Using nearly all her savings, she purchased a one-way ticket back to Kenya. As the plane landed at Kisumu National Airport, her hands trembled. What if mother refuses to see me? What if Imani hates me forever? She hired a taxi. When the driver asked for the destination, she quietly replied, Imani Creations headquarters. As the vehicle approached the company, she stared in amazement. The small tailoring room she remembered had become an impressive glass-fronted building. Delivery trucks loaded with fashion products entered and left the compound. Employees wearing company uniforms hurried in every direction. Her sister had built an empire. Amani slowly stepped out of the taxi. At that exact moment, Imani emerged from the building after finishing a meeting. Their eyes met. Time seemed to stand still. Neither spoke. Finally, Amani walked forward with trembling legs. Before she could say another word, she dropped to her knees. I'm sorry, she whispered through tears. Imani remained silent. I poisoned you. Workers nearby stopped walking. Mama Grace, who had just arrived at the office, froze in disbelief. I stole your opportunity. Her voice broke. I was jealous, and I destroyed both our lives. Mama Grace covered her mouth. So, it was you? I've carried this guilt every single day. She lowered her head. I don't deserve to be called your sister. For several moments, nobody moved. Then, Imani slowly bent down and gently lifted Amani to her feet. Her own eyes were filled with tears. You wounded me more deeply than you'll ever know. Amani nodded. I know, but hatred would only poison my heart the way jealousy poisoned yours. Amani looked at her in disbelief. You forgive me? I forgive you. She paused. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. I understand. You lost 5 years chasing a dream that was never meant to be stolen. Amani cried even harder. Imani embraced her. Come home. Mama Grace joined them, wrapping both daughters in a tearful embrace. The employees watching nearby burst into applause. Months later, Amani began working honestly within the company, not as an executive, but by coordinating community outreach and mentoring young women. Whenever she spoke at schools, she told her own story without hiding the truth. Never let jealousy choose your future, she would say. The shortcut I took became the longest road of my life. Years later, interviewers often asked Imani how she felt knowing her biggest international customers were in New York, the very city her sister had sacrificed everything to reach. Imani would simply smile. Destiny cannot be stolen. If an opportunity truly belongs to you, honesty and perseverance will bring it back in ways you never imagined. The irony was unforgettable. Amani had poisoned her sister to stop her from going to New York. Yet, in the end, Imani reached New York through her thriving fashion business, with Uncle Robert proudly supplying her fabrics, introducing her collections to major retailers, helping her designs reach customers across the city, and facilitating her international travel to the international brand shows. Amani had arrived in New York as an employee, but left as a nanny. Imani never relocated there, yet her name, her designs, and her success became celebrated throughout New York. The opportunity that jealousy tried to steal returned to its rightful owner through patience, talent, and integrity. Jealousy may appear to create shortcuts, but it often leads to painful detours. Success gained through deception rarely lasts, while success built on honesty, perseverance, and hard work can cross borders, transform communities, and even return opportunities that seemed lost forever. Forgiveness heals broken families, but every choice leaves consequences that become part of our life story.